Hi and welcome to my video for the Texture This Video Hop. For those who don't know me, my name is Paula and I create under the names ScrapFX and Moxie Mojo, and I have the distinct privilege of being a member of the Susan Taylor Brown Poppiness design team. For this video hop, we wanted to explore all about texture, as it's such an important part of all our creating, no matter whether we're making junk journals, cards, scrapbook pages, art journals, or anything else. So what is texture? Texture can be divided into two broad areas, physical texture and visual texture. Physical texture, also known as tactile or actual texture, are the patterns of variation upon a solid surface. It has a physical quality that can be felt by touching the surface of the texture. It has relief, 3D characteristics that you can feel or touch, height, width, and depth. It reflects or blocks light differently from one angle compared to another angle. Visual texture, also known as implied texture, has the illusion of having physical texture. It's a texture that is created to look like something it is not. This texture only has two dimensions, but the eye believes it is just as real as physical textures. The two dimensions, height and width. It doesn't play with light in the same manner as physical textures, but adds visual information. The surface remains essentially smooth, but has the appearance of texture. Why would we want to use visual texture rather than physical or actual texture? When you have no access to the physical texture, for instance, machine stitching. If you don't have a sewing machine, then you can't achieve that texture on what you're creating. When it's not practical to use a physical texture, for instance, you might be doing a masculine scrapbook page and you want to add the texture of a tire print or tire tread. It's not practical to put tire actually into your project. In order to get the look of texture without the physical dimension, where longevity or destruction of the texture might be an issue. For instance, if you were doing a junk journal about nature and you wanted to put some leaves or ferns in there, or at least give that texture, but you run the risk that the leaves themselves might be destroyed over time. And finally, in order to prevent damage to the object that you are creating, for instance, again thinking about a nature theme, if you wanted to put tree bark in a junk journal, you run the risk of the tree bark actually damaging the rest of the journal. So I wanted to show some examples of visual texture, as well as showing you how you can create the look of texture or dimension yourself in your creating. These examples can be applied to whatever it is you're creating, no matter whether it's a junk journal, ephemera, cards, ATCs, art journal pages, scrapbook pages, or anything else. So let's start by looking at some common examples of visual texture. The first is collage, and you can see that here. One quick and easy way to create visual texture is to use collage to create texture without adding too much dimension. I've got a couple of samples of this. The first is this background I created from torn pieces of book pages that I've adhered onto a sheet of watercolor paper. I had a pile of scraps of book pages from other projects. I tore them into smallish pieces, then collaged them onto the background using matte medium both underneath and on top of the book page pieces. Additionally, I've added a couple of patches of music themed printed tissue paper. The depth of the collage is barely perceptible, but it certainly adds a great deal of visual texture as a background. The second example fits both collage and into the next category, prints or images of texture. These two journal cards are from the Patchwork Playground printable kit by Susan Taylor Brown, Poppiness. Susan has collaged together small patches of fabric and then machine zigzagged the fabric in place. She has then turned the fabric collage into images for her printable kit. This enables her customers to have the look of a machine-stitched fabric collage, but without the need to have their own sewing machine, the skills to sew it all together, or the patience to do all that work. 2. Prints and images of textures, including pre-printed and printables. I love the look of natural elements such as leaves and feathers in my creations. However, 1. I don't know how to create eco-print pages. 2. I'm pretty sure I don't have the patience to create them. And 3. I don't have the variety of leaves and plant materials that some people such as Susan has. I also prefer my nature at a distance, and not close up where I'm likely to have to deal with bugs and other creepy crawlies. The other big concern for me is that I don't want to use materials in my creations that might damage or affect what I'm creating, especially after all the hard work I've put into it. Hence why I would much rather use prints or images of the natural texture instead of the real thing. This is an example from another of Susan's printable kits, Sunset Dance. Using this, I get the look of the natural texture of the leaves, but without the potential downfalls of using them. And let's be honest, I get to use colours that you wouldn't normally see in nature. Doesn't it look stunning? 3. Stencils. Stencils are a great way to achieve texture or dimension. They are incredibly versatile as well, and they can be used with a variety of materials such as ink, paint, texture pastes, and gesso. I've taken a selection of some of my stash of stencils and used Distress ink through them to show some examples of stencil textures. The choice of the stenciled image, the material used, and the technique used to apply the material through the stencil all impact upon the outcome achieved and can be manipulated to achieve numerous looks and effects. For instance, you can use a cracked stencil to get the look of cracked glass without the hazards associated with it, such as cutting your fingers. You could use a texture paste through a brick stencil to get a look of stone or concrete brick wall, but without the weight and practical limitations. Stamps. Stamps are a great way to achieve the look of texture or dimension without the mess or need for a long list of materials to achieve the look. With a selection of stamps and inks, you can create a variety of looks with a minimum of effort and cleanup. Manufacturers and designers are constantly coming out with new and amazing stamps. Some are so detailed and precise that the look of texture is so incredibly deceptive you wouldn't believe it's not real. I went through my stash of stamps to give some samples of the textures that can be achieved. Many textures are available in multiple versions. For instance, a wood texture can be achieved as planks of wood, wood grain, or wood rings. A brick pattern can be achieved by stamping individual bricks, a brick wall, or the mortar pattern. If you don't have access to a sewing machine or can't sew but love the look of sewing, then you can achieve the look of sewing by using a stitching stamp or by doodling a row of hand stitching. And if you're like me and you like the look of leaves or feathers on your creating, but without having to confront the bugs, then you can stamp them and colour them. For instance, green for spring leaves and yellow, orange and red for autumn leaves. So how can we add dimension to our work? Well, one of the first examples is through highlighting and shading. Highlighting and shading can be used to give an image, a shape, the look of dimension, and can be created in a number of different ways. You can cut multiple versions of the shape, the main coloured item, as well as a black and white version of the shape. Laying a black slightly off centre underneath creates a shadow version of the shape. Trimming the white down to a thin strip that follows the contours of the shape will create a highlight. You can also achieve the same look using a white pen to draw the highlight onto the shape, and then using a dark colour to add the shading. Here I have drawn the white highlight with a paint pen and then used a black gelato to add a thin black shape around the bottom curve. I then smudge this with my finger to soften the shading and make it look more dimensional. Below the circles you can see two copies of the same stamped image. This is an old cigar label stamp I picked up second hand. I stamped the image onto a piece of white cardboard, then fussy cut both images out. I adhered both onto white watercolour card. Underneath the bottom stamped image, I drew a line with an oil pencil, then blurred it with a water brush to create a soft shadow below the stamped image. You can use things such as charcoal, paint, coloured pencil, watercolour pencil, graphite pencil, gelato. Just about anything, but it's definitely easier to create this look using something that is water blendable. Perspective. Foreground versus background. Perspective gives you a depth of field or shows that something is closer to you than another object. One way of doing this is to use the same image or similar images but in different sizes, and then align them in such a way as to allow your eye to easily flow from one image to the next. Here I use three similar face images, all of which show close-up detail of a woman's facial features. I've placed the smallest image in the upper left corner and the largest one diagonally opposite in the bottom right corner. Your eye is drawn from the largest down to the smallest and can almost be fooled into seeing that the smallest image is further away from the large image and not that they're on a flat piece of paper. Another great way to show dimension is to layer things on top of one another. Look closely at the two butterfly images. Do they look the same size to you, or are they different sizes? If you think the bottom butterfly is bigger than the upper one, then you're not alone. Your eyes are seeing that it is bigger, even though in reality both images were stamped with exactly the same rubber stamp. The sizing of the black frame, together with the layering of the butterfly over the top of the smaller frame, fools your eye into thinking that the bottom layer is bigger. Distressed edges. One of the simplest ways to give a look of dimension and texture, and one that many of us do without thinking, is the use of distress inks or the like to add emphasis to the edge of the image, item or page. You can use distress, oxide or some other ink, paint, pencil, gelatos, pit pens, marker pens or any number of other materials, though preferably something that is able to be smoothed out, softened or lightened as you move from the edge to the centre of the item. Going back to the two Patchwork Playground journal blocks, We can see this really clearly. Although the colours in the two blocks are very similar, the bottom journal block really stands out from the craft cardstock and is much more noticeable than the journal block without the distress ink on it. If anything, the upper block almost recedes back into the page where the lower block appears to stand out from it. I hope you've enjoyed my presentation on visual texture. If you haven't already seen the other videos in the hop, be sure to check in the description box below for the links to the other participants in the hop. Please think about showing them some love by giving them a thumbs up if you've enjoyed their videos, and be sure to subscribe to our channels and click that bell to be notified about future videos and hops. It's been a real pleasure making this video. The more I thought about the topic, the more I wanted to share with you, and in the end I had to cut it down to just some finished examples of what I wanted to tell you about. If you'd like to know more about anything in my presentation, or you'd like to see some more detailed tutorials, please leave me a comment about what you'd like to know, and I'll be happy to respond. Many thanks and happy crafting!